Hi guys, how's it going? I thought today, because this channel is about photography, there will be some travel films and some photo tips and fun as well. But I wanted to show you some photos of London. London's one of the places that's definitely my top three favourites. And I wanted to show you the photos and explain to you how I took them and why I took them, and hopefully to give you some inspiration when you go to London or a city anywhere near where you are and you want to get some photos that just look that little bit special. One thing I will say first of all, if you're shooting in auto, you're using a SLR camera, digital camera, whatever, come straight out of auto. Auto can get you some good photos, but it does struggle quite a lot more in certain lighting. So if you've got some tricky lighting, sometimes the auto can not quite get it right, even though cameras today and technology wise has greatly improved. So I shoot mainly in aperture priority, so I set my camera onto A. If you look at my flower photography video that you saw earlier, and the camera's on the tripod, you'll see the dial is set to A. Aperture priority basically just means that you can adjust your aperture and the camera will give you the correct shutter speed, and most of the time working in aperture is just fine. There are times when the lighting can be a little bit more tricky and manual comes into play, but that's another subject for another day. So let's have a look at some photos from London, and I hope during this time of our lockdown, and it's been very hard for all of us, but one way or another we're going to come out stronger with this. So let's take a look at London and add a bit of colour into your life. I'm going to slide through some photos and tell you a little bit about them. So grab yourself a coffee, sit down nice and comfortable. Here's an example of using one of the windows as a reflection. So walking up along to Blackfriars Bridge from the South Bank, check out some of the windows in your city and look for those unusual shots. They can really make a photo stand out and give it a very unique look. Have you always wanted to try street photography, but at the same time you're a little bit afraid to or a bit shy to? Well, don't be. As long as you dress relatively smart and smile, people will respond to you most of the time in a really nice way. My tips for street photography is, if somebody looks uncomfortable, don't photograph them, just simply walk away and look for the next subjects. These three ladies are outside the Tate Gallery, but look at this lady on the left. She really stands out with these bright colours, and she just looked and gave me a smile. It's not a unique photo, but I just find it very, very pleasing to look at. So have a go at some street photography. You never know what you're going to come up with, but we can discuss street photography in later episodes. It's one of my favourites. It's probably number one subject actually, but it's just delightful, right? Here's a photo that I took on a day on the Tower Bridge. And I was standing in the middle of the Tower Bridge when I took this shot, looking over towards the Canary Wharf and turned it into a sepia look, just to give it that slightly industrial look and that little bit of old charm at the same time. And note the clouds that give it a little bit more a dramatic shot to the actual photo. So if you're going out when there's clouds about, you can really make an impact with some of your photos. Check your local weather forecast before you go out. If you get a sunny day with clouds, you're going to come back with some really great photos. How about some long exposure photography? The Tower Bridge is on the right hand side of me, but again the clouds were rolling by. This was a 10-second shot on a tripod, looking across towards the gherkin and what we call the mobile phone, and you can just see the tower buildings here on the right hand side. That's also a great day out. But again, it was just a great day to get this kind of shot. And yeah, works in black and white. Black and white can be really good, but again, that's another section that we can discuss later on. How about getting the train to North Greenwich Station, turning right and walking along by the river to the Thames Barrier. The construction of the Thames Barrier began in 1974 and the opening date was 1982 at a cost of 534 million. This has been photographed so many times, but still makes for great shots, especially when the tide goes down. Again, this was around 8 seconds at f16, but I had a 10 neutral density filter on at the same time. Filters on long shutter speeds, or shall I say long exposure, that's something else I'm going to discuss more in detail to help you with your long exposure if you've never done it before. It's great fun and you can get some very spectacular results, and it's not that difficult to do either. While we're on the subject of the Thames Barrier, this is another shot taken from the little cafe at the top looking down at the barrier. So at the weekends, if you want to grab a slice of cake or a cup of tea, something to eat, look out the window down at the Thames Barrier at the same time, have a bit of a rest. You can see the O2 there in the background, and it's about 30 minutes walk, but it's well worth it. And I'll show you something very interesting which is between the O2 and the Thames Barrier that many people may pass, including myself. So the ecological centre here is between the O2 and the Thames Barrier, and it's just a place that, you know, you wouldn't think you're in London when you look at it. The colours of these buildings and shapes, you can get some great photos here. You get some lilies growing across the middle of the lake, lots of wildlife, and it just gives you a nice little break of something completely different along the way. It's a fantastic walk from the O2 to the Thames Barrier, and there's so many different subjects to cover. You can get some fantastic photos and have a really good day out. So that's something for you to look forward to. It's just one more shot along the eco centre on a very rainy, cloudy day. The rain stopped at this particular time, but as you can see, the colours and the lilies of the lake there and the reflections, they really do make a great photo. Now, I told you about taking photographs on a rainy day in London. Don't be afraid if it's a dull, overcast day and it is raining, because some of the best shots can really come from the rain. I love all the big puddles you get on the ground. But this was taken underneath Blackfriars Bridge, looking towards Southwark Bridge. And as this man was walking along, suddenly lifted up his camera, bam, and there was the shot. So don't be afraid to go out in the rain and get some photos. Keep your camera well covered. You can get a plastic covering or something for it. Just need to plan your shoot a little bit so that you're comfortable when you go out on your day. But you can get some terrific photos when it's raining, when other people won't go out. So I hope that gives you a bit of inspiration to get out there even if it's raining. Just make sure you are, you're wrapped up well, have your coffees, and look for those opportunities of shots that other people wouldn't notice. This photo was taken coming back from the O2 on a boat, and the boat trip from the O2 back to the London Eye at Waterloo is definitely well worth it. And again, the weather was very unpredictable that day, but without the clouds in the sky, this shot wouldn't have looked as dramatic as it does now, and it works well in mono. If you take shots like this in colour, have a look at them in black and white. You might find it preferable. I normally shoot in colour and then turn the photos to black and white. Some people just shoot straight in black and white, which is fine. But as you can see, the Shard here is looking very menacing up against that sky. But it's a great moody look of our city of London. This one was taken as the boat was turning the corner, going back towards the Tower Bridge. I had a very quick chance to grab this shot before it moved out of distance. But again, the clouds and the mono look really gives the photo a lot of impact. Excuse the flickering on the camera on video. I haven't set this up for the computer yet. Another shot, again, this was around about 2 seconds. It wasn't a very long exposure, but a very moody, threatening sky over the Thames barrier. I took this in colour, but it didn't have the same impact as it's got in mono there. Go to the Thames barrier, set your camera up and get some of those great shots from there. It's well worth the trip. How about staying until nightfall? This shot was taken at the Shard of the Tower Bridge behind me. Note the leading lines leading towards the Shard using the floor. And again, night photography can be absolutely superb. You don't always need a tripod, but generally speaking you want quite a fast lens that opens up, you know, to about f3.5. If you've got a prime lens that's f2, f1.8 or even 1.4, then those lenses, because they open up so wide, will give you a lot more light, so it's easier to get the shot. But night photography, although challenging, can be at the same time very rewarding, and this was a really good night out. I love the Shard, I love London, and the opportunities for the photographer, any photographer, any level, can be really exciting. Here's an idea for you. Buy yourself a small book on the tide times in London. This was taken underneath the Millennium Bridge on a night of long exposure photography with some of the people in my group. This was an amazing evening. We've got some small reflections there on the foreground of water droplets. But this was a very, very good night. And this exposure, if I remember rightly, this was about 8 seconds. And this was taken with quite a wide angled lens between 9 and 14mm. It was actually set at 14mm as well, because I didn't want any distortion. But the Millennium Bridge at night, it looks great. When the tide goes out, you can actually get onto the riverbank itself. It's a really exciting evening and well worth doing. If you want any tips or anything on how I took the shots, or suggestions, you know, you want to know how the shot was taken or the time, best way to set up, just get in touch with me. Subscribe to my channel and I'll always get back to you with ideas and suggestions. But London at night, when the tide goes out, there's lots of bridges and a way you can get down to the river to get some shots like these. So here's a photo you see taken on the north bank of the Shard, shining through. But again, you've still got some clouds in the sky, which just gives it that little bit of extra detail. Some very old wood breakers down the bottom there on the foreground. I'm not quite sure what they were about, but they obviously a lot of history there. And the colours in the river look really nice. It's a terrific way to get your photos. Go and get yourself a bite to eat. Perhaps go to London a bit later on. But say, buy yourself a small book. You can get a small book on the tides of London, and just make sure you're safe, because when the tide comes in, believe me, it really comes in fast. So just be careful what you're doing. But oh, and a tripod. You definitely, for these shots, you do need a tripod. Doesn't always have to be heavy. Again, check the weather conditions if it's not too windy or anything. But a tripod is an absolute must, and a cable release for your camera. I thoroughly recommend that as well. So there you have it, guys. Just a few photos from London. Hopefully to get you excited, in case you're like me, you know, you're locked in and can't go anywhere at the moment. But I thought, well, while I'm sitting here, I need to do something. And yeah, if you've got any, you know, questions you want to know, please get in touch with me. And I hope you enjoyed some of the photos and descriptions, and I hope I was able to help to give you some tips and some inspiration towards your photography. Whatever kind of photography you do, enjoy it. Go out in that back garden, take a few photos of some flowers, play around with your compositions, go lower down, try some different angles. It's easy just to press the shutter and take one photo or two photos, but look for a different angle. What I quite often do is use the viewfinder in the camera sometimes, rather than using just looking visually straight ahead with the eyes. I put the camera to the eye, and then I go down with the camera itself and the lens. And quite often, because I've obstructed everything else around me and I can only see the subject through the viewfinder, quite often the subject is there. It just suddenly pops, and it's something that I actually do when I go out as well. If I see a subject that I think, yeah, that looks quite nice, it looks promising, it could make a good photo. So what I do again, I bring the viewfinder up to my eye, I obstruct everything out of the way so I can't see anything else but the main subject, and then I might walk, if it's a flower or a, you know, some kind of a duck or a bird, if I get a chance I might, or a tree for example. Photographing trees can be really nice, but again, walk around the tree, look at the lighting, look at the composition. If it's a tree, take your time, there's no particular rush. Don't just see the tree and think, yeah, I'll take the photo, because you may walk around to the left or the right of the tree itself and suddenly find a composition in your viewfinder that just stands out